going to start off here just real quick with just a brief summary. This is coming from IMDb, and it states that determined to ensure Superman's ultimate sacrifice was not in vain, Bruce Wayne aligns forces with Diana Prince with plans to recruit a team of metahumans to protect the world from approaching threat of catastrophic proportions. Okay, again, that comes from IMDb. That is the summary. So the way this normally works is we start off by talking basically spoiler-free, just talking about our initial impressions of the film, what we thought of it just generally speaking. And then we actually get into the deep dive. We actually get into a spoiler-filled conversation and get really into the nitty-gritty. So let's just go ahead and start off with our initial impressions. Eric, you were texting me some as you were watching it. I have a feeling I know where this is going to go, but go ahead and tell the folks who'll be watching your initial impressions of Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Well, I want to reiterate, we have that prize, right, for people that are commenting. Dave, could you show it again real quick? Because this is one of those shows where I would really like to hear what you folks have to say. I would really like to hear what the Rogues Gallery has to say. Now, on this show, we always try to give incentives for people to comment. Okay, so this is actually a Justice League of America comic book, and assuming that you live within the United States, we are going to send this to you. We're going to send this to one of you, I should say, because of just for commenting. So again, we try to encourage you folks to participate in the conversation, and this is definitely one of those reviews where I would love to hear what you folks have to say, because hey, maybe my perspective is just totally off, and I wouldn't mind hearing from you all. Speaking of that, Jane is in the house, and she says, hey, guys. Orville Nation, our great friend PJ from Orville Nation is the house. He also says, hey, guys. PJ, if you've seen this, I would love to know your perspective on this film. Oh, and Jane actually says, I finally have internet. I also got to watch the movie you're reviewing tonight. So, Jane, please chime in with your opinions on this. So love to hear them. We got Matt Henshaw in the house. He says, whoop, JLA. I assume you mean the comic, but maybe you mean the movie. I don't know. And by the way, thanks, PJ. That was the first time I tried that. And because I was trying to do hashtags, and I guess I got it wrong. So apparently the hashtag on our YouTube is wrong. I didn't do it right. I've never used hashtags on YouTube before. And that's why, because I see that other people do it, and I wasn't sure exactly how you do it. So apparently I messed it up. But anyway, thanks for letting me know, PJ. I do appreciate that. Matt Henshaw does mention that he has not seen the movie yet. So it looks like Orville Nation also says he hasn't seen it yet. So there are a few people out there. And by the way, this is why we do spoiler free at the beginning of our reviews, because we don't want to spoil you if we don't have to, right? And I always think it's kind of nice to do a review without spoilers. You know, if you go back to, like, you know, I suppose my favorite critics of all time, like Siskel and Ebert, that's what I grew up on, right? Especially Ebert. I didn't like Siskel as much. I always thought he was kind of not very fun. I thought he was always too artsy fartsy for me. But I did enjoy both of them together, and I did enjoy the show. I grew up watching it. And they did non-spoiler free reviews all the time. That was their bread and butter. That's what reviewers are supposed to do, right? So we do try to do that to make sure that you folks don't get spoiled if you don't want to. And then, of course, once we get into spoilers, we always put like a little ticker up there so people know that we're getting into spoiler territory. Orville Nation mentioned that looks awesome, Dave, talking about the comic. So,
I was going to point out, too, one of the reasons we're giving this away for Justice League is, number one, I am an official Justice League of America artist. That is my name right there, everybody.
That is so cool, isn't it? That is so cool. Dave, show it again. Show it again. Come on, show it again.
Okay. All right.
Look at that.
So,
because there was a little bit of glare. We couldn't see your name. You're almost covered with your finger, but yes, it's right there. I love it. Right, it's awesome.
That's why we're giving it away on tonight's show. I did work on the Justice League, and more than once. So
yeah. That is awesome, Dave, and we do. I appreciate it too, as your co-host, that you do this, that you come up with so many cool things to give away to our audience. I should take a look. I've got stuff I can give away, so we need to make this go. This needs to be a two-way street, right? Because seems like you're always giving stuff away.
Now, in addition to that, too, we are still going to go ahead and do the trading cards too. I'm probably giving away too much stuff. We're also going to do this tonight as well. We're actually going to be giving away Impel Marvel trading cards tonight for commenting, because we want to hear your thoughts about the Zack Snyder Justice League. We are not kidding. So this is the trading cards that were setting the superhero trading card world afire. Not these two particular characters, mind you, but just this particular series. So tonight we're giving away a couple of classic Spider-Man villains. We have Dr. Octopus, who is rumored to be showing up in this next Spider-Man movie. And then we have one of my favorites from watching the old cartoons back in the day, the Lizard. So all you have to do, again, is just comment during the show. That's all we want you to do. Just comment. You're entered into a contest. One person's going to win these two cards tonight, and another person is going to win this copy of Justice League of America #2, which I worked on. And it's one of the things we have to decide, and I want to hear this too. You all need to let me know if I should sign this or not, because basically it's weird, because sometimes signed books actually decrease the value. So you'll have to let me know, should I sign this? Should I not sign it? So that's something else to think about.
That's kind of a weird thing, Dave. I actually became aware of that fairly recently myself, and I don't quite understand that. You know, how is it that a comic book goes down in value when one of the creators signs it? And I guess it has to do with condition, right? I guess that's considered a faux pas. Like it's like modifying the original work somehow or something like that when it comes to grading.
Well, here's the thing that's weird. Part of the reason it decreases the value right now is because CGC is like the standard, right? And you want to have your books graded and authenticated. That's the big deal. It's got to be authenticated. It's got to be legit, right? And so the irony of that is that they go, well, if a CGC representative did not see you sign the book, then it's not legit. Well, this is me.
Oh.
I have a pen right here. I have the book I worked on right here. So you're going to be able to say, look, on video, that guy's signing it right there. So I don't know how you get more legit than that. But so in this case, I feel like it's pretty legit because it is me. I am possibly going to sign it if you all think I should. All right.
Lynn has a little question mark there. Rare unsigned edition.
Well, here's the difference. Here's the difference, Lynn. Now with Bushy Tales, I get it. We signed as many books probably as we sold. The difference with this is there's a lot more copies of this book. For example, this is one of the variant covers. This is the Juan Jose Rip variant covers. And there's more than just this. I've got in this box over here from the comp books that DC sent me back in the day. I've got this variant cover. I've got the David Finch uncolored one. That's I don't know what they called that. I've got the regular edition. So there's a lot more of these unsigned than signed in this particular case, Lynn. But you're correct. With Bushy Tales, you want to have the rare unsigned edition.
And Matt Hinshaw says, I watched you sign my copy of JLA #1. So that counts, right?
That's right. That's right. In my mind, it does. And I did sign it. So.
And we do have someone actually from Twitter, Sci-Fi Critic, it looks like, and he's just saying cool. So thank you for joining us. We very rarely get comments from Twitter. And obviously, it's got the little Periscope thing. We very rarely get that. So we appreciate that, Sci-Fi Critic. We appreciate you commenting. And because of that, you're eligible to win one of those items that we were just showing. Now, I want to go back to a comment to start my my spoiler-free review, my general impressions. Matt Hinshaw hit something right on the head for me. Okay, just right off the bat, and this was something that I was concerned about going into this. And Matt Hinshaw says, "I don't have 4 hours of, I assume, life to spare. I do want to watch it, but I want to watch it in one sitting." Okay. Now here's the irony, Matt. Here's the irony of what you just said. Okay. I actually do have quite a bit of free time, especially during the week. Okay. I made a pretty good decision at 21 that allowed me to basically retire at 41. Okay. I still have to do other things to sustain myself. That I don't have enough just to do nothing, but I do have a lot more free time than most. Okay. Especially at my age. But the 4 hours sitting was always a concern for me. And it did sort of bear out that way for me. In fact, when I was sending comments to Dave mentioned that I was sending him comments as I was watching it. I was not enjoying it very much. And we're talking about the first half of the movie. Okay. And at one point I said, I've had enough. I've had enough. You know what? I gave it a chance. You know what I mean? I've watched basically half of this film. I'm not really enjoying it. I think I'm done. I think I'm done. That was on Monday. So then I kept thinking, wow, is that really a respectful thing to my audience to just basically say I only watch half of the movie because I wasn't really digging it and I felt like, you know, I'm wasting 4 hours of my life. And then I realized, you know what? I should at least finish it. Okay. So I did not sit down for 4 hours and watch it. Okay. I didn't. I couldn't. I'm sorry. I started to get angry. I was kind of sitting there like, what's the point of this thing? I'm not really enjoying this. What is this really offering that's new? I didn't like the appearance of Darkseid, which I don't think that's a spoiler. People know Darkseid does show up in this one. That's been like in the trailers and stuff. If it's trailer information, I don't think it's a spoiler. I think that's a caveat there. If it's in a trailer, it's not a spoiler. When I first saw what they were doing with them, because Darkseid is like a huge character to me. For those that do not realize this, Thanos is essentially a ripoff of Darkseid. Okay. Darkseid was created by Jack Kirby himself. Okay. When people talk about, you know, oh, I love Jack Kirby and Stan Lee sucks and blah, blah, blah. Jack Kirby created Darkseid. Marvel ripped off Jack Kirby to create Thanos, who I think is an awesome character. I love Thanos. Okay. I think he's one of the few awesome MCU villains that we've seen. I've said this many times. I think the MCU has a huge villain problem. And the DCEU, or whatever you're going to call it, or right now, I guess it's the Snyderverse because this is sort of an aside, right? They have a real opportunity there with the great DC villains to really outshine Marvel in that department. So there was all sorts of things I was seeing and I wasn't really liking. And I decided to go back. Well, not go back, but at least to watch the rest of the film. So I did go out there and I did go ahead and finish it. I did finish it. And I will say this, to be not Mr. Negative or whatever. I think the second half is a lot better than the first half. But the fact that you have to go through 2 hours of this nonsense to get to some of the better stuff, which, by the way, one thing that I thought was really telling and interesting is pretty much all the moments that I really enjoyed in the theatrical cut. And I should mention, I am a theatrical cut fan. I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I saw it with my family. We really liked it as a family. We really enjoyed it. I saw it in the theater. So all those things are absent. And by the way, in this viewing, I'm watching by myself. You know, I'm at home. You know, there's nobody else with me. I can't let my kids watch it, by the way, because it's rated R. I don't let my kids watch rated R movies. So it's like, it was a very different experience, right? And that's part of it, right? The way you watch something, the environment you watch something, that's going to have an effect on what you think about the film. But what I thought was really interesting was pretty much all the moments that I really, really liked in the theatrical cut, they're in this version. And I kept asking myself, so what is fundamentally really different? You know what I mean? What is, other than the fact that it's much longer and there's all these alternative takes. And by the way, that's what really got me in the first half was I kept thinking to myself, and you know, I'm a filmmaker myself, and I kept thinking there's so many like discarded takes in this just to be different. And folks, there's a reason filmmakers discard takes, because they're not as good as the new ones, as the reshoots, as what comes later. And that's why I was getting really, really frustrated. But again, to not be like the negative Nelly out there, I did enjoy the second half a lot more than the first half. I'm just going to put it out there that if you're kind of like me, and maybe you enjoy the theatrical cut, maybe you're more traditional and you don't like the darker take on the DC characters, especially Superman, because I think Superman is supposed to be all about positivity. And I really hated some of the things that Zack Snyder has done with Superman, and this is no exception. He does some crazy things with Superman that I do not like. But you know, the problem is, I think if you're like me and you haven't watched it, you're going to have trouble with that first hour, maybe two, and it's going to be really difficult to get to that third hour and ultimately to that fourth hour. And I also say this, at the end of the film, they put in a lot of interesting stuff. Okay. Some of it I like, some of it I don't, but at least it's interesting. But it's like, it like goes by in like 10 minutes. And I'm sitting there thinking, I was wasting all my time in the first 2 hours of this movie. Why didn't we get rid of some of that stuff and have more of some of the stuff that happens at the end so we could expound on that a little bit? and make a truly different film. Because again, all the stuff that I really liked from the theatrical cut is still in this. To me, it's not really fundamentally that much of a different movie. So I sit there kind of thinking, what's the point? So that's kind of my initial spoiler-free impressions.
Well, that's yeah. I knew it from your text you were sending me that you weren't exactly loving it.
By the way, we do have another opinion here, and that's why I said I do want to hear from you folks, and I meant it. And this looks like it's somebody new. It's Deej Odyssey. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that your name right. And he said I like the full 4 hours. So there you go. I mean, there are people that I know really enjoyed this film, and I get it. I get it that other people have a different perspective, and you're always welcome to express that perspective on this show.
And on the Retro Rogues, as many of you who are normal viewers who are the Retro Rogues, you know that Eric and I often seems like don't agree on things.
Well, speaking of viewers of our regular viewers, Hollywood Jackson, you hit the nail on the head. It needed more Picard. That's what it needed. That's what it was lacking. That's an inside joke for any of you that are new. I do see some new faces on here. That's an inside joke because Dave and I hated Picard. But yes, Justice League needed more Picard. That's what it was lacking.
Well, let me just say this. I did not hate it. And I actually liked it better than the theatrical. I genuinely did. I don't think it's the best, DC movie I've ever seen. But I will say this: it was definitely epic, in my opinion. I really liked what they did with the pacing, even though it does at times seem to drag a little bit. I did like what they did because I did feel the absence of Superman in this movie, and that was the big thing for me when I watched the theatrical version in the movie theater. I found it really kind of odd because I felt like Superman hadn't really been gone very long. And then all of a sudden it seems like he's back. So for me, that's kind of where I was at, is that I was sort of like, I don't really, when I watched theatrical, one of my complaints was just, I just didn't feel like there was much, time that had basically elapsed. But in this one, I did feel that, and I liked that. I really, really felt like, okay, you could feel his absence. And overall, because of the epic tone, because of the fact that we got way more of certain characters, which I love from the DC universe, I think I like this one better than the theatrical. And I enjoyed it. It just seemed, 4 hours is a little bit too much for, I think, just about anybody at times, especially in today's society where it's like, quick, like it was strange sin. But I will say this, I was surprised that for me, the 4 hours didn't drag as much as I kind of feared. And then to not get too into the spoilers just yet, we did have a new viewer who asked a question. He said, where did it go? We're kind of falling behind. This is one of those rare instances where we fall behind on the comments. Sci-Fi Critic asked, what did you all think about Superman in this version? Without getting into spoilers, Sci-Fi Critic, I liked Superman in this version. It was kind of, it's definitely more the Man of Steel version. But I liked Superman in this quite a bit. When we get into spoilers, I'll talk about a particular scene in general I really, really loved. And I like seeing the black, as they call it, the regeneration suit from the comic books. I enjoyed seeing him wear that. They didn't really explain it, but there's actually a scene. Well, again, we're avoiding spoilers, but I did like Superman in this quite a bit.
So for a counterpoint, I didn't. And I don't like the black suit very much. What it really reminded me of is Man of Steel. And the black suit for me in the context of the Snyderverse, because you can include Batman versus Superman and Man of Steel in the Snyderverse, obviously, because he directed those films as well. It really harkened back to Zod. In the context of this film, I was just thinking, I thought Zod. Because remember, Zod and all of his minions, they all wore the black suits. So we can talk about the comics. And by the way, Dave will always blow me away on the comic book knowledge. I've said it 100 million times. I didn't grow up reading a lot of superhero comics. I read G.I. Joe and Transformer comics. That's my comic forte, if you will. So most of my stuff when it comes to superheroes comes from the cartoons, from the movies, things like that. That's what I was really into. That's what introduced me to a lot of these different characters and things like that. And for me, I just felt like in the context of the previous films, the look and the feel of Zod and his crew and everything was all like, that's kind of what Superman was evoking to me. And I think that was intentional. That almost gets into a little bit of a minor spoiler, but I think that was kind of intentional. And I don't necessarily like that direction personally. Now, as Dave mentioned, we are getting a little backed up in the comments. I'm so happy to see people commenting. And again, hey, this is just one guy's opinion. We'd love to hear yours. There's plenty of other opinions out there all over the place. So we are getting a little backed up and Dave flashed the comic book that we're going to be giving to one of you for commenting live on the show. Again, that's to encourage you folks to give a comment. And remember, Dave actually was involved in making this. So of course, that's, like I said, Dave knows the comics, obviously. I mean, he worked for Marvel and DC. I mean, I can't compete with that, but I can give my own perspective. And we have a comment here where E.A. Cardis, which this I think is Efren, a good friend of mine, he said, if DC and Marvel are to survive, they have to either create or go back to child-friendly stories. And I'm really in that camp. I'm definitely in that camp. And by the way, if this is Efren, I know you actually love the Snyder Cut. I think I saw your comments on Twitter. And so, and hopefully I'm not being confused, because there's another comment here that says, yeah, this is who I think it is. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from. Like I actually saw when I was looking at the Snyder Cut, the Superman animated series is now available on HBO Max. Did you see that, Dave? The 90s one?
I did not, but it is a great series. I was actually, this will date me, but I noticed they put the Aquaman, and it looks like they've remastered the old 60s
We
Aquaman.
talked about that. We were talking about that. Yeah.
I'm still rewatching those, so sorry.
No, that's awesome. I thought it was really cool that they put Aquaman on there, and you and I even talked about that. But for me, the two series that really define the version of the characters that I love the most, it's the Batman animated series. That's my Batman. I'm talking about like the 90s Batman, and then the 90s Superman, the Superman animated series. I love that, and I love what they do with Darkseid in that. They do some really crazy dark stuff that's still cool with Darkseid, but Superman isn't dark. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the argument that I've always heard against Gene Roddenberry with Star Trek, where writers got frustrated with him because they said, oh, well, we can't have conflict with the humans because the humans are supposed to be evolved, and it makes it so hard to write. And, oh, I'm lazy and I'm a hack writer and I don't understand this. And I was always just like, well, you show the conflict with the aliens, right? You use the aliens to show the conflict. I think that would be fairly simple, actually. I understand that formula. Same thing with like what we're talking about, showing if you want to make things a little bit darker, right? You're talking about the DC universe, the villains. They've got tons and tons of dark, crazy villains. Use them. That's what they're for. Then you can show all that darkness. You can show all that angst. Darkseid has a crazy story, actually, too. With the suns and all that kind of stuff, and the swapping of the suns, and he has a crazy story too. Orion, all that stuff. There's all sorts of crazy stuff to explore with a character like Darkseid. We don't get into any of that in this. Now, Jane does say she enjoyed it. And Jane, again, hey, Dave did too, right? So there's all sorts of perspectives out there. Everybody's perspective is valid on this show. And Matt had an interesting question, which, Matt, if you had seen our previous show, if you had seen our Justice League preview, you would have an idea of the answer to this question, but I am going to let Dave answer it. So Matt Henschel asked, what's your favorite DC film, Dave? Because we actually were talking about that in our lead up to Snyder, where we reviewed Batman Forever's and the Donner cut. Remember, this has happened before. The Donner Superman cut. That was one that I reviewed. And Dave reviewed Batman Forever in the context of basically undervalued, underrated DC films. That was our lead up to the Snyder cut. But Dave, you mentioned your favorites, so why don't you tell Matt what your actual favorite DC films are? I think you're muted, Dave.
I just thought it's weird. I've had this problem, this double click problem. Everyone's gonna feel like I'm referencing Modern Family, but I'm not that old. But I was having an issue with my mouse lately, because I keep thinking the mic's on and it's off. All right, so to answer the question, I did talk about this, I think, last episode. And for those of you who don't get that, in Modern Family, there's this ongoing bit where the guy from Married with Children, he doesn't understand how to double click. All right, so I talked about this last episode, and Erica and I had many conversations about this. I'm kind of torn at times. It's hard for me to pick just one. But my top 3 DC movies, Superman the movie with Christopher Reeve, I think is still the standard. That's always in my top 3. I really love Dark Knight Rises. I know that may sound weird to people. There's just something about Dark Knight Rises that I really, really love. And then, for my third film, I mean, it's like this revolving door of all these other, movies. But Batman, Mask of the Phantasm is a great one as well. So,
that's what we've reviewed. We have reviewed that one as well on this show.
Because I feel like, and I've said this before, I feel like Batman, Mask of the Phantasm is probably still the best Batman movie they have ever made, as far as a movie that's been released into theaters. It's just such a fantastically well-written, well-structured. It's a great use of a villain, and I really, really like it. So for me, those are going to be my top 3. You ask me that again in 6 months, and maybe it'll change a little bit. But those are always in my top 5, top 3 list. There's Mask of the Phantasm is always there. Dark Knight Rises is there. I can't explain to you why I love that movie so much. I just rewatched the hell out of it. I don't know why. It's like I explained it to Eric. I said, for the longest time, I couldn't understand why someone would say they liked Return of the Jedi better than Empire Strikes Back. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And then when you look at Dark Knight and you look at Dark Knight Rises, that's where I'm at. I like Return of the Jedi in the Batman films better than Empire for some weird reason, and it doesn't make any sense. Star Wars, I still love Empire more. And then obviously Superman the movie, I feel like that is the standard. And I think it's probably always going to be the standard, at least with me. So there you go.
Yeah, it's hard to pick just one. We mentioned that in our previous review. That's why we decided to go with underrated instead of just like picking our favorite DC films, because it is hard to just pick one. And this is the Efren that I know. He says, hey, Eric, we need to create a good comic book universe. Efren is a fantastic artist. If you guys want to check out his content, he actually does right now. I know he's been doing I think a sports show or something like that, where he's been talking about the Lakers a lot and things like that. But Efren does create his own content, and he's a fantastic artist. I actually worked with him on a project, and it's probably one of the best projects I've ever been involved with as far as comics, other than the present company, which is, of course, Dave, because we also did a comic together for Occupants. So I do have some good company and some good taste when it comes to the artists that I use for my stuff. But Efren, that would be really cool. And we definitely should talk about that more. He does have another comment about the Snydercut, which he says, Zach's strength is action scenes. And I don't deny that. One thing I want to make clear, and I've tried to make it clear many times, but I see new faces in here. I'm not a Zack Snyder hater. I own Watchmen and I own 300 in my personal collection, and that's a big deal because I don't have a big personal collection of films. I really don't, considering how into this kind of stuff I am, considering that I have a show and all that stuff. I don't have as big a collection as you might think. I mean, I see other people's collections who are like casual fans, and it dwarfs mine. I do own 300 and I do own Watchmen. I am not a Zack Snyder hater, and I love 300 because of the action. You talk about action. Oh, that's fantastic. It's fantastic. But I will say, I don't really know, in my opinion, I've only seen the film once and I saw it in 2 parts. I don't know if the action was really that much better than the theatrical version. And I have a specific example of that, by the way, of where I thought the theatrical version did something that I thought was much cooler than what Snyder did. So I agree that he does great action. I don't know if I agree he did the best action in this film, or even this version of the film. Lynn says, I wish they would have used the black suit for the epilogue. Zach just seems to not like color for Soup's costume. And that gets into something that will also be something I would like to comment on when we get into spoilers, because he did something weird there with the suits too that I didn't like. But I kind of agree with you there. If they had used it for the epilogue, it would have made sense to me. In the context of the Snyderverse, No comics, no nothing else, no animated series, nothing. In the context of the Snyderverse, the black suit introduction would have made much more sense in the epilogue. And if you've seen it, you all know what I'm talking about. That's my personal opinion.
I feel like I kind of liked what they did with the black suit in this, just because it kind of fit. Like, I wish they would have there had been a little bit more explanation that he was actually using that when he flew in front of the sun to kind of recharge himself, because in the comics, that's what the regeneration suit was for, is it was kind of helping to kind of recharge him like a solar power, kind of thing. I wish they kind of explained that in some sense. I mean, if you're a comic book fan, you see him flying in front of the sun and he's wearing the regeneration suit, you go, oh, okay, I know what that's all about. But for in context of the movie, it just looks like he's flying in front of the sun to fly in front of the sun. I mean, I guess if you watch Man of Steel and you remember all that stuff, you kind of know, but I don't know. That's the kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that's sort of like, and we're supposed to be avoiding spoilers, and I'm talking about spoilers. Okay, but I still like the black suit.
So Efren mentions that one thing that's different. He says the movie difference is in character development and Darkseid intervention. And by the way, it's almost like, okay, we're wrapped. You know what I mean? It's true. That's really the big difference. It is in character development. I agree. There is more character development in this version of the film. And of course, Darkseid. There's no Darkseid in the theatrical version. So I think you're right on there, Efren. Those are the key differences between the theatrical and the Snyder cut. I would agree with you there. Chris Roberts is in the house. And he says, woohoo! I managed to cap an episode again. Laugh out loud. We're glad to have you here, Chris. Again, we are giving away this comic book to one of you for commenting on the live show. We are getting a very robust Rogues Gallery today. Hey, a lot of people want to talk about the Snyder Cut, apparently. So yeah. Who would have thought? Oh, we did. That's why we chose this topic. Right. And Jane is curious if you are going to sign the comic. He says, Dave, you are going to sign the comic you were giving away, right? So
I have a pen right here, but like I said, we within the Rogues Gallery, we need to make that decision tonight, because like I said, there are some people that seem to think if CGC doesn't see you sign it, it's not legit. Well, this is me. Here's my pen and here's the book, and I will sign it live on tonight's show. If the members of the Rogues Gallery think I should sign it. And then obviously, of course, we're going to give that away to one of the commenters this evening. Again, for those of you who are new here to the show, basically the way this works is you just comment in the Rogues Gallery. We take all the names, kind of throw them into a hat. We draw one out at random, and then that person basically wins. We contact you via whatever platform you're on. You could be on YouTube, you could be on Twitter, you can Facebook. It doesn't really matter. We contact you. As long as you're inside the United States, because I don't like to ship things out of the United States just because it's a hassle for me on the shipping side. But basically, we contact you. We say, hey, you won. You go, woohoo. And you give us your address, and then I send it to you. And that's all you have to do. You don't have to sign up for a Patreon. We'd like for you to share this video to some people who you think might enjoy the show. Please. But we're not even telling you to do that. We don't have like a comment cap. We don't have like a new subscriber cap. There's none of that nonsense, because we want you to just be a part of the conversation here. But and we want to thank you.
We've got a lot of people in the conversation. We're getting way backed up here. So Deej Odyssey says, personally, the 4 hours was just about right. It helped give time to flesh out the characters that sorely got the shaft in the first release. Gave this myself 9.5 out of 10, far superior. And I think that also dovetails off of what Efren said about character development, and I don't deny that. That I do not deny. Sci-Fi Critic says 90s Superman and Batman animated series rocked. Yes, that is my Superman. That is my Batman. Again, I didn't read a lot of the comics growing up. My brother did have a substantial collection of Silver Age Superman, and I did read those as a kid. He had a pretty decent collection of that. But otherwise, the animated stuff is really what defines the characters for me, because I was introduced to most of these characters by Super Friends of all things, which I wish they would put that on HBO Max, but I'm glad they're putting the Superman series on there. So apparently Warner Brothers can't do everything at the same time. It says Superman and Batman are part of a universe. This is Efren again. Superman and Batman are part of a universe that reacted to to Marvel 90s superhero murderers. That's interesting. That's an interesting perspective there, Efren. And I want to make sure I'm just kind of scanning the comments just to make sure we're not in spoilers yet. So, okay. So Lynn says, saw an interview with Deborah Snyder where she said she just never really got Superman. He says, I think Henry Cavill does, but don't think Zach does. Like Superman Returns, Brandon Roth got Superman, Bryan Singer didn't. Wow, Lynn, that's kind of where I'm coming from, 100%, because I think Henry Cavill does a great job as Superman, even though I don't like Man of Steel and I hate Batman versus Superman, like hate it. But I think Henry Cavill did a great job as Superman, and I agree with you. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head from my perspective, which is that, yeah, I think Cavill gets it. I don't think Snyder does. And then, like you said, Superman Returns, Brandon Roth got it. I don't think Singer did. The mistake I think Singer did, and by the way, we have reviewed Superman Returns on the show. I don't know if it was the podcast version or the live version. We have reviewed it.
Was the podcast version.
It was the podcast version. And so we did review it. And the thing is, for me, one of the big things is I felt Singer was like almost too devoted to the original Christopher Reeves version of Superman. I thought he was like a little too devoted to it, and almost like he could have done more if he wasn't like so devoted to that version of Superman. That's what I felt. I felt that's the biggest problem. And Dave, you and I talked about also we had some issues with the chemistry between Superman and Lois Lane in that one. That it just didn't exist.
I felt like that. Well, there's a lot of fun advancement, in terms of what they're doing with the story. I felt like that some of that stuff just kind of it just didn't click between those two. Well, like it did with Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder. And to be honest with you, I haven't had a chance to see the new CW show, and I know a lot of people are really enjoying the new CW show. And I definitely want to check that out. I like Tyler Hoechlin, whatever his name is, who plays Superman in that. I enjoyed him in the Crisis event, so I still want to check out the CW version of the show. And I've heard a lot of people like that. And it does a similar thing. A lot of the contemporary Superman, it seems like they are moving into the Super Sons idea, and everyone's taking a different approach to this concept, right? Which of course
that was one of the things I thought was actually the neatest thing from Superman Returns. I actually liked that. I thought it was a neat thing. It took me by surprise, and I actually enjoyed that. The super child, if we will, right? So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting, and I am aware because I have watched a little bit of what is it? Is it Lois and Clark? What's the one on the CW we're talking about?
I think Sci-Fi Critic just put up. He said that he loves Superman and Lois. Maybe
Superman and Lois. Okay.
Yeah. So
I have watched a little bit of that, and to be honest, it wasn't really grabbing me. That doesn't mean I'm not going to give it another chance, but what they were doing in that particular episode, I was just like, I don't know, man. I really don't know.
Well, I really want to check it out. I haven't had a chance yet. Like I said, I like the cast, and from what I've seen of it, I think we just did a reaction to one of the trailers here on the show at one point. I mean, it looks interesting to me, so I definitely want to check it out.
And Dave, we have to make a note to go back to Chris Roberts' comment later in the show, because it is a spoiler, but he's got an interesting comment there that I agree with. Matt mentions that he says, "Sorry, I am a slacker. I wish I could be here more often." Matt, we're glad you're here tonight. We understand that people have lives and they got other things to do sometimes. Efren says, so DC became a dark universe to fight Marvel mercenary universe. That's an interesting idea. Now I get where you're coming from. That you're saying that I'm assuming you're really talking about the DCEU or whatever you want to call it, that they decided to be dark to basically sort of compete with Marvel. I could kind of see that. I could definitely kind of see that, because Marvel actually, in a lot of ways, the MCU is almost borderline goofy. Some of the stuff that I haven't liked with the MCU was almost like too goofy. Although I did like Ant-Man, and he's really goofy. So, it's kind of interesting, the different approaches you see with the different franchises. Sci-Fi Critic says, why do they not listen to the fans? Well, Sci-Fi Critic, a lot of people say they did, right? This is why we got the Snyderverse, is because they did listen to the fans, because the fans wanted this. or a certain segment of fans wanted this, I should say. And they did listen in this particular instance. I mean, you got to give, whatever you think of the film, you got to give Marvel that, AT&T, whatever we want to call that behemoth. They did listen to the fans in this respect.
So some people would say that there's almost a conflict that's developed because of listening to the fans, because in a sense, Sci-Fi Critic, depending upon the perspective that you want to look at, specifically this Justice League movie that we're talking about right now, you know, the theatrical was a response to the negative reaction to Batman v Superman. So they kind of retooled and made some changes and then gave us kind of a more Marvel-y version that was the theatrical one, right? Which kind of dialed back on some of the stuff that they doubled down on in the Snyder Cut. So you kind of see to an extent that they are trying to listen to the fans. I think the problem, in my opinion, because like I said, I like this Zack Snyder, you know, Justice League movie. I didn't hate it. I think I like it better than the theatrical. But I will say the problem is not, I think, sometimes listening to the fans. I think sometimes it's just knowing when is the right direction and when is not the right direction. Like I feel like Kevin Feige with Marvel, he definitely has a plan for what he's trying to do in terms of how they're interconnecting and structuring everything so that it kind of works. And they do have a blueprint that they are following. They'll still make changes, but they have a blueprint that they're looking at. And Kevin Feige is the captain of the ship steering it. And then the issue sometimes with the DC films is that there isn't really like a captain in charge steering the ship. And at times there's different people who fight to be the captain, at least at one point steering the ship. And that's what caused some of the conflict and some of the problems between the theatrical and the Zack Snyder version. So it's a weird thing. I mean, when you start talking about the amounts of money that they've invested in this particular film alone, you know, everybody on the executive board and, you know, like like everyone's going to have a say when you got this much money tied up into something, and compromise sometimes is part of the game. So, but in this instance, Sci-Fi Critic, I do feel like they did listen to the fans, because that's why we did eventually get the Snyder Cut. Regardless how you feel about it, they did listen to a particular segment or group of fans. That's why we even got to see this.
And that's a really good point, is they listened to a particular segment of fans. I talked about this last week when we were doing our lead up. Don't kid yourselves. The Snyder DC verse is controversial and divisive. Whatever you think of it, whichever way you fall, it is divisive. It is not something that it's not like the Christopher Reeve Superman where it's like universally acclaimed. It's not like Superman 2 where everybody rips that film off, literally, including Snyder, Man of Steel, right? So keep that in mind too. So it's kind of also like, well, do they listen to fans? Well, which fans? Because as Dave was mentioning, a lot of people didn't like Batman versus Superman. I'm one of them, right? I was one of those people saying, yeah, I don't like where you're going here. And I'm also one of those people that enjoy the theatrical cut. So I do want to make that point that the fans are very divided when it comes to these films. And that's why you're kind of seeing what's happening. So it can be a big problem. And as Dave mentioned, I think he has a great point in saying that the difference is Feige too, right? Because you have somebody that's really understands all this stuff and is, as you said, the captain of the ship. And I don't know if AT&T has, well, I know they don't. I mean, let's just say it. Let's call a spade there. They just don't have that.